Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Scappman webinar. We're going to give it 1 more minute, and I hope that by then everything is ready on your end as well, Tess.
Yes, I am good to go.
All right. Whenever you're ready. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and welcome to this Scappman webinar from 0 day to zero trust, why TVM is an essential part of the journey. I'm joined here today by Peter Daalmans and Thijs Lecomte. Peter he's got a lot of acronyms. He's an MVP, an MCT, a freelance consultant. He's been an MVP for about, I think, Peter, 10 years now.
Yep, hopefully
Long as we can
Friday.
Exactly. And also Taz is a security consultant for the Collective, a very renowned security consultancy firm. He's also an MVP and consultant there at the Collective, as I said. And I'm Wout. I have a lot less acronyms. I'm the co-founder of Scappman, and I'll be hosting this webinar for you tonight. So Taz, you can take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I'll give it the floor first to Peter, and then I'll join in.
Yeah, thanks, Thijs Wout, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be part of this webinar because nowadays we have a lot of security challenges in the modern world when it comes to protecting our identities and data, of course. Almost every day we read about organizations that have been breached or that are attacked by bad actors, with the only goal is to extract data or encrypt systems via cryptolocker attacks so they can earn a little bit of money or a lot of money. And the impact of a hack, a breach, leaked or stolen data is enormous for many large and small customers. It's costing worldwide organizations billions of dollars, and it can be destructive to an organization if they are hit. And of course, there are many different kinds of attacks, and one of them are the zero-day vulnerabilities, which we talked about, which we will talk about today, that are exploited by bad actors. We have seen many examples in the recent past, like the Exchange active sync of Exchange server remote code execution vulnerability exploited last year. As it seems, there's still a lot of customers that did not remediate this vulnerability just by updating their system. And maybe they are actually also being misused at the moment by those bad actors. But also the Log4Shell one, which is already known since 2013, but it's only been exploited since 2021 in November. Services like AWS, iCloud, Cloudflare, but also Minecraft Java Edition were affected. And the exploit allowed hackers to gain control of a vulnerable system just by using Java. And often the affected systems were used for crypto mining, cryptocurrency mining, creating botnets, sending spam, or facilitating ransomware attacks. So it's very wise to keep track of exploited vulnerabilities and their mitigations, and also if they apply to your systems. So next slide, please. So the current threat landscape is changing all the time, and it's hard to keep up, but for a long time we have to deal with malware such as spyware, ransomware, viruses, worms, and that are often exploiting vulnerabilities on our systems. Also, for an example is Emotet. It's a major challenge. And it's called the world's most dangerous malware. It's first detected in 2014, and it's still around. It's basically a global botnet that it can be used for attacks for hire. In the cybersecurity community, it's also referred as MAS, malware as a service, cybercrime as a service, or crimeware. In the past, Emotet email campaigns were related to invoices, shipping notices, bank expiration notices, COVID-19 information, all resulting in a crypto-locked device. In January last year, international action coordinated by Europol, were able to take control of the network and disrupt the infrastructure. But then, last November, new infections were reported again. So I think all of us, maybe most of us, received multiple emails like that. Hey, your COVID results are in. Please open this document. So trying to get access to our environment. Whereas in the past, vulnerabilities in Windows were the main attack vector. Nowadays, it's also third-party software, drivers, firmware that are attackers have high on their list to get access to. Patching Windows, the drivers, the application on the operating systems should be one of the highest priorities on your list when managing endpoints in your environment. When a vulnerability is discovered or exploited, it can take hours, days, sometimes weeks until a patch or workaround is being created by a software vendor. Some are released via an update, which can be installed automatically, but some are just, for instance, by deleting a registry key as a workaround, like we have seen recently with the Windows Support Diagnostic Tool vulnerability. You need to make sure that your process to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities is in place. And the process could also be a temporary solution by making sure that the vulnerable system is just not reachable from the internet. With the Exchange exploit, a lot of companies temporarily disabled access of the internet access from the transport server, so that the server was unreachable until the server was mitigated, which to me is a valid solution. For sure, it has user impact, but it's also something like better safe than sorry, right? When allowing a vulnerable system to be exposed on the internet may cause even more issues and have a bigger user impact in the end. So the attack factors of the attacks evolving constantly. For bad actors, it is a business model to find vulnerable systems, misuse them, and earn a lot of money. It's a really huge problem that the complexity of those attacks are also changing. It's getting more complex over time. And for companies, for organizations, it's really hard to keep up and to find the right experts to help them. So maybe it's also time to invest in services that can help you detect and mitigate possible security issues. So Thijs, next slide, please. As mentioned, bad actors are not only targeting Windows as a platform anymore, but also apps, services, firmware, and so on. By adopting vulnerability management, we can identify if there's a vulnerability, if that's existing in your environment, and in an early stage, and then if it's fixed, if we apply the remediation, and we can also check if it's actually fixed. And that's really important. To show how important it is, according to the Ponemon Institute, 57% of the data breaches have been prevented by just installing a patch in time. Plus, 34% of the respondents were aware of vulnerability before being attacked. So why didn't they update their system and their applications while knowing that the vulnerabilities were there? Was it just lack of money or lack of IT staff? I think if we look back, then automation is key. You need to limit the time that a vulnerable system exists in your environment. And for sure, when you know that the average time to identify and contain data breach is like 280 days. And that's a really long time, if you ask me. So next slide, please. So before I hand over to Thijs, let's briefly discuss Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Defender for Endpoint is the service that you do not want to skip while managing Microsoft 365 services. It is a security platform that is designed to help organizations to prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to really advanced threats in your environment. It consists of a lot of components, so I won't name them all, but let's go through a couple of. First, Defender for Vulnerability Management. Thijs will dive into this product, but it helps you to use a modern risk-based approach to discover, assess, prioritize, and remediate vulnerabilities and misconfigurations on your endpoints. And by endpoints, I do not mean Windows only, and many other operating systems are supported. The second one is attack surface reduction. With attack surface reduction, we have a set of capabilities that provide basically as a first line of defense. For instance, by configuring the secure folder feature in Windows, or by disabling the fact that other processes can be started from Office documents, but also capabilities like the network protection and web protection, which basically regulates access to malicious IP addresses and known malicious domains. The third one I like to, and last one I like to mention is the Microsoft Secure Score for devices. And that's a really neat and easy tool that helps you dynamically assess your security state of your devices. And it will come up with recommended actions, if applicable, to higher up your security bar, if necessary. With that, I want to pass it on to Thijs for a further dive into the vulnerability management.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for this great introduction. So I'm going to be talking about and diving deeper into the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, which Peter already discussed as a part of a larger stack called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It is important to know that you might be used to the name Threat and Vulnerability Management, as it's also shown here, but Microsoft wouldn't be Microsoft, and they updated the name. So instead of being just Threat and Vulnerability Management, they updated it to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. Besides the name change, there's one important part, is that they have an additional license, an additional SKU. You now have a Plan 1, Plan 2. A Plan 1 is by default within the MDE license. A Plan 2 is sold separately and will probably be included in D7 in the future. But everything we're going to be talking today is included in the Plan 1, also in Defender for Business. So if you're using either Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Business, this will be included. So let's first take a look at what is supported within vulnerability management. Imagine if we start up right now and start looking into the environment, what will we be able to see? Well, there's a few different options. The first, of course, is the easiest, it's Windows devices. Makes the most sense. Desktops and laptops, these are all scanned and will be identified for vulnerabilities. Of course, we also have Mac OS and Linux. So it's not only limited to the Microsoft platforms, we also have other platforms like Mac OS and Linux. So these will also be scanned for vulnerabilities specific to the operating system. What is also included, if desired, it's Android and iOS. So end users can install the Microsoft Defender application on their phone, which will also identify vulnerabilities on these platforms. It is important to know that this is still being rolled out, and the user experience and user privacy isn't ideal, but it is supported so you can have a full overview of your environment. What is also really important is that there are other platforms supported besides these as well, which is pretty unknown. One of them is network devices. So what you can actually do, and we'll deep dive into this a little bit, is you can install a sensor, a scanner on your network, and this will actively probe certain IP ranges looking for network devices. Why is this great? Well, so we can identify threats or vulnerabilities which aren't on a client operating system. So this could be your Cisco switches, your HP switches. It will log into those network devices through SNMP and look at, for example, the configuration, but also the operating system update? Are you running a vulnerable version of the Cisco iOS operating system? If so, you will get a recommendation about why you should patch this specific switch. It is important to note that this is limited to a couple of the best well-known vendors. It's not applicable to all network devices, but support is rolling out, and this is a really nice feature to have. What we also have in a limited kind of support is we have IoT devices. So for example, in a customer, there is a Apple TV, and we regularly get notifications about the Apple TV being out of date. And so you will get recommendation about specific IoT devices, such as Apple TVs, but it could be printers and such in the future, which could have an out-of-date operating system. Well, the question, of course, we have to ask is how do we identify those vulnerabilities? Because, of course, the vendor has to be able to see somehow what these vulnerabilities are on a device. And there's actually a few options. The most default option, which isn't included on the slide here, but it's just a PC, which is onboarded into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. As long as you're onboarded into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint and you have the sensor running, it will collect information about the vulnerabilities, about the configuration of your device, but also the software updates, and it will push these out to the cloud, which means each device that you have onboarded into the EDR solution will have active vulnerability scanning enabled. But it doesn't stop there. There's also a feature called device discovery, as you can see here. And what does this do? Well, each device which is onboarded into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint will actually actively probe different devices on the network. It will go over to a device, see what version of an operating system it's running, see what operating system it is running, and then it will look into the specifics of that. It will look at what version it is it out of date, is it running out of date network protocols? So it will be able to identify certain machines which aren't even onboarded into the solution. And this is a feature which is enabled by default. So if you log into your portal right now, you will be able to see that in the inventory. And what is also a feature is, of course, we talked about this just a minute ago, SNMP scanning for network devices. So we have one sensor, an onboarded machine, could be a Windows Server, for example, configured with a probe, which will do active scanning. So it will scan the network devices and put them up into the dashboard. Well, what will we see if we see those recommendations, and what will we get in terms of vulnerabilities? There's a few different choices which depend on the action which is coupled to the vulnerability. So of course, we have different vulnerabilities and we can get an overview of all of those vulnerabilities. But what is the most important part is you want to know, what can I do about it? What should I be doing as an IT admin, as a security admin, to mitigate those issues? So we have 3 different types of recommendations, which will show up in the portal, and we can look into the portal in just a bit. But what are the different recommendations? Well, the first one is configuration changes. Let's take a stupid example. What is used to deploy most of the ransomware out there? It is MDVM. MDVM is a protocol which should not be active in the environment anymore. If you have MDVM active in the environment, you should get out of this webinar, and go fix that, because that's so important. But that's an example of a configuration change. MDVM should be disabled. What else is we also have operating system updates. So that's pretty convenient. We have Windows updates, Linux, macOS, Android, iOS. These are software updates. So for example, the latest security patch from Microsoft for Windows 11 will have certain mitigated vulnerabilities. So this will be an operating system update which can be deployed. And of course, what we're talking about here today and later today as well is application updates. And these are updates to third-party applications. So it's important to third party. This is not limited to only Microsoft applications. It could also be every known third-party application. So it will couple CVEs to certain third-party applications. So the default applications, Chrome, 7-Zip, Adobe, are all included, and you will get recommendations and vulnerabilities of those third-party applications. Once we have all those applications put in the portal, we can look into our exposure score. So what is the exposure score? It is a score which is provided by Microsoft to an environment to estimate how secure you are. How many recommendations have you done? How many vulnerabilities have you removed from the environment to know, to gauge how secure you are? And it's important to know that the lower, the better. So here is an example of an environment of 37, which means 37 is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good. And it will just show you an idea of where you're at with the security in your environment. What is nice to have, this is not so useful for an IT admin because we don't care about numbers, but it is a great way to talk to management to see what you're doing, what are you improving. Let's say you just onboarded all of the devices into TVM, you could be looking at a score of like 70 if you don't manage it. But if you then implement the security baseline and disable MDVM, for example, it will go to 50. And if you configure an application such as Scappman to mitigate third-party vulnerabilities, it will go to 20 and 30. So it does provide some nice opportunities for you to show what you have been working on. It is important to know that if you ever reach 0, let me know, send me a screenshot, because to me, it is something which is almost impossible, and it is not a good goal to put for yourself. What do I mean by that? Well, as Peter said, it's an ever-evolving security world. Each day, a new vulnerability pops up, something changes, something might be incompatible with your current environment. So having no weaknesses in the environment is just not possible. So we have been looking into an overview of TVM. Before I give it to Wout to talk about Scappman, I want to dive into the portal to show you how it looks like and what you can do with it, how you can take it into action. So let me get my portal up and running. So if all is well, you should all see my screen. I will enlarge this just a bit. So this is my test environment, which is currently logged into security.microsoft.com, which will show us the Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management dashboard. So this is the generic overview, the generic dashboard. We can see the exposure score right here, but this isn't really actionable. I want to deep dive into some things. So let's first deep dive into weaknesses. Weaknesses is a overview of all vulnerabilities which are active in the environment. So as an example here, in this test environment, we have 390 vulnerabilities which are currently exploitable, active within the environment. Of course, this is a huge number. How do you handle this and how do you look into this? Well, there's a few things you can take into account. One is the severity, which is based on the CVE score. So each vulnerability has a score from 0 to 10. So for example, if we filter on the highest CVE scores, we will be able to see, for example, this is a CVE 9.8, which means exploitation is likely and it will have a big impact on the environment, which means this is probably something you want to patch. What is also really convenient are those two icons. They are not lit up all the time. I'm looking for an example. Yes, here we go. So we have this vulnerability from Windows 10 from 2021. What does this mean? Well, this little bug means that there is an exploit available. Anybody can go out in the and GitHub, for example, download the exploit and use it. So what is this? This is a targeted breach notification. And if you have a security incident from the EDR sensor, so the antivirus from the vendor, and the environment, you will actually get a notification right here, which means this vulnerability is currently being actively exploited within the environment. So this means it should be looked at immediately. Going further, what else do we have? Is we have the recommendations. So the recommendations is something I discussed before. Each weakness will be coupled into a recommendation. which means what should you be doing about it? How can you improve the security of your environment? And as you can see, there are a few types right here. And these are the types I talked about. So we have configuration changes. We also have software updates. So if we look into, for example, software upgrades, updates, and uninstalls, we can get an overview of everything which is vulnerable in the environment. This is a test environment which doesn't have a lot of clients in it. So this is a bad example. But this is a really nice overview to look into and see what vulnerable applications you have, because you will have a ton. What is handy about this view is that it provides, it's sorted by impact, which is Microsoft's way of saying this is a priority you should be looking into. How is the impact score calculated? Well, it's based on a few different things. It's based if there's an active exploit being exploited within the environment. It will look into the weaknesses, how many weaknesses are there, and what is the severity of the weakness. But also, really important, how many devices are exposed. How many devices are currently being exposed to this vulnerability, and should you mitigate? And this next here to the exposed devices is a really nice graph, which is extremely useful. And it provides you an overview of the trends. And this is important because, as I said, it's almost impossible to have a zero always. You will always have increases and decreases. And this is a nice example, for example, for Windows 10. It goes steady, it has like 7 vulnerable devices, and a patch came in, we did 5, and it suddenly dropped to 0, which means patching cycle is complete. Every device has received this patch, and no devices are vulnerable. And then a new exploit came out, and it increases to 4. And this is the thing we want to see. We don't want to see a stagnant line, as we can see here, because this means we don't do anything about this. Within the environment, we don't patch Windows Server 2012 R2, which is problematic, of course. So these graphs show you an overview of how the environment fluctuates. And if you are going to be looking, for example, at the demo of Vote a little bit later of Scappman, you will see that each device will have a nice fluctuation, which means you're doing a good job. Exploit comes out, it goes up, and then a patch comes out, and depending on the patching cycles, it will decrease. But let's deep dive into this patching cycle and let's see how this goes. So if we look into this slide, this is an overview of how you would be packaging an application if a vulnerability comes out. So of course, we're talking about modern workplace, so Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune. And what are the different steps we have to take? Well, there are quite a few of them. First, of course, we have to know if a vulnerability comes out. This means monitoring TMM or monitoring Google, for example, to see if they release a new update and see what comes in. Then, of course, second step is looking into how can we do this installation silently, because each application will have a different automated configuration. It will be /q, /qwen, /quiet, /silence, /very silence, /very silence. It's about everything which is possible, which means you have to know for each applications what are the silent install scripts for you to do. Then, of course, we need to get the correct MSI, the executable, and package that. Because, of course, for Intune, we need an Intune Vim file, which means we generate an Intune Vim file through a utility from Microsoft. We create an Intune Vim file, and we push it up into Intune. But of course, it doesn't stop there. What we need to do is we first need to create detection rules before we upload it. Detection rules means how can Intune see when the installation was successful. And this can be extremely difficult because for each version, it could be that just the version number updates. So you need to be using the version number to do detection, or the MSI update could change entirely for a new update. So these are all different things you have to watch out for. And only after that, after those 5 steps, you can upload them into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And then, of course, deployment starts. And this means we will hopefully not push it all into one big bang at all. We will first do an initial deployment. test and validate it. First scope, for example, a small IT bubble, then go into a business pilot, and then roll out to the entire environment. It's important to have that testing in place, to have those update rings in place, to make sure that you don't cause any issues with the updates. And so this is just an example of how a manual packaging can go. But of course, like Peter said in the beginning, a new vulnerability comes out every day. So if you're serious about remediating vulnerabilities, you have to have somebody almost full-time to download all of the updates, test them, and push this out. And of course, this is where I'm going to head over the words to Wout, who will now provide information about what Scappman can do to ease this process and how it can automate some of these pains and these vulnerabilities.
Thanks, Nas. If all is well, I should be sharing my screen now. There we go. So that's indeed that process. That's what we help you with at Scappman. How I like to summarize it in a single sentence is we automate your application installs and updates using Microsoft Endpoint Manager. But it's not just that process that we try to make easier. We also try to make MIM a better product. So we try to solve some of MIM's limitations, and I should call it actually enhance MIM. For example, with application update rings. So as Taz already mentioned, when you're updating applications, you don't want to update that application for all your devices at the same time. Just like you're doing with Windows update rings, if you break something with that application update, you don't want to break all of those applications on all your devices at the same time. You want to make sure that if you're going to break something, you're going to know beforehand. The second example I like to use is available applications. So in Intune, you can make applications available for a user to install using the company portal. I am personally a very big fan, but the big challenge with those available applications is keeping them up to date. Because today you're making version 1.0 available, for example. The user goes to the company portal, installs that version. Tomorrow you're updating it to 1.1. The user is going to have that new version available in the company portal as well. And he's supposed to actually go back to the company portal to install that update. But I think we all know that's never going to happen. So that means you're going to be stuck with that version 1.0 until the end of times, unless you figure out some way how you can force the update for that application, which is what we've done. And the third example is logs. Intune is very good at telling you when something goes wrong. That's great. But why something goes wrong is always a challenge to get out of Intune. There's very little logging, and the logging that is there is difficult to get out. So what we're going to do with it as well is help you with getting those log files out and actually generating a lot of log files to start with, and then making it easy to get those log files out of Intune so that you can actually see what went wrong during that install. And last but not least, we also thought a bit about the user. By default, when Intune is going to update an app, it's just going to close it down, which is obviously not a great user experience. So what we're going to do is when we have to, we'll show a notification to the user where they can choose to either postpone the update or to install it straight away and to close the app. And then we'll make sure that app gets deployed on that device. Obviously, when we can update silently, we will update that application silently. But the biggest challenge is the amount of time it takes to manage and maintain all of those applications, as Tad already mentioned. I like to use Chrome as an example because Chrome updates 1.2 times a week. It's going to take you between 3 to 8 hours to package and to test it. It's actually the testing bit that's going to be most time consuming because there's a lot of scenarios which you have to test. So you spend a lot of time on a single update. And if you then look at the number of applications you have in your environment, then you really have a challenge because it's going to be very time consuming. And if there's any managed service providers between you, you're going to know that it's even worse because you have to repeat all of those things for all of your customers. So it's extremely time consuming to manage all of those apps. So what we've got as a solution for that is really a SaaS that's going to make it very easy, very automated to deploy and manage all of those applications for you. Basically, you're going to set it up once, you're going to configure it to whatever you want, and then we'll make sure everything gets automated after that. And if you don't want to, you don't even have to check anymore after that. Just to give you an idea about where you plug in, these are the three default flavors in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We've got the old school tenant attached, which is still very much on-prem. Then you've got co-managed, where you're part in the cloud, part on-prem, or really number 3, cloud native, where you're really full on in Intune, and we are really going to plug into the Intune part. So if you're co-managed and your application workload, your client app workload is on Intune, or when you're cloud native, we can help you out because we are going to directly integrate with Intune and not directly integrate with Config Manager. How it works is actually very simple, as I said. So you can just register on our portal. Then you can sign with your Microsoft account. Then there's an app registration that's going to give us permissions to deploy applications to your tenants. And then you're already good to go. You can start assigning applications to your users and your groups. So basically, you're going to be up in a matter of minutes. I'm going to skip the registration part during the demo, but I'll show you how easy it is to deploy a bunch of apps to your devices. And what we're doing all the time is we're scraping the vendor websites to see if there's updates available for those applications. We're going to package them. We're going to push them through our test cycle, which includes an autopilot scenario, by the way. And then once they've gone through that test cycle, we're going to push them out to your tenants and make sure that they're updated there. And then Intune will make sure the apps get updated on your devices. And now it's time for the demo. So what I've got here is a tenant which I've already registered. It's got some apps here, this is the dashboard. This is going to populate over time as you have apps that are deploying and failing as well. And this is where the magic happens in the App Store, where we have 668 public applications actually, and all of those applications, if you deploy them, will update them for you. I'll just take 7-zip as an example here because it's an example with a lot of options. If we install 7-zip, first of all, you can select a language for the application. If you select a language, we'll make sure it gets deployed in that specific language. If you select multi-language, we'll actually leave the default behavior of the application, which for 7-zip means that it's going to decide in which language to display based on the Windows OS language. So I'll just select English for now. And then you can already select some assignments here, either all devices, some specific users. So any user you may have in your environment, you can select here, which is something that isn't actually supported by Intune itself. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a group and populate that group with those users and assign that group to your application. Obviously, any existing group you have in your environment, you can select in here as well, and we'll make sure the application gets installed gets assigned to those groups. And that's it. You're already good to go. You can already deploy some apps. This is a basic UI with just a few options. Obviously, where the cool stuff happens is beneath the advanced button, where we add a few more buttons. First of all, you can select the bitness for an application, whether or not you want to create a desktop shortcut, and then some settings about the notification. So this is the notification we're going to show when we're going to update the app and it turns out the application is in use. So imagine you've got 7-zip running on your device. Obviously, when it's running, we can't update it. So we're going to show a notification where the user can have some options in that notification. So first of all, you can select the style for that notification. Please select modern. We're going to move over to that in the next couple of months. The modern one looks a lot more sexy than the classic one. So everyone, please select the modern one. And then this first option is the number of days we should try to silently update an app. What that means is basically the first 2 days in this example, we're just gonna, when the app is running, skip the updates, and only after 2 days, we're gonna start showing that notification. That's to create less notifications for the user. So to decrease the number of notifications we're actually showing, you can configure this to 2 days, for example, and then we'll try to update it silently for the first 2 days. The next bit is a postponement. So on that notification, the user can decide to postpone the update of that application. Here is defined to 3, we'll leave that for now. And then how many minutes we should leave that notification open before we're going to close it and automatically update those applications for that user. If you've got some displays running somewhere that are unattended, for example, then we'll make sure that those apps also get updated on those displays. That's it for the first tab. On the next one, we've got the commands bit. So here you can see what we're running and also customize it. For example, in the 7-zip here, we're gonna be using the 64-bit MSI. We're gonna think about any existing scenario you might have and how we're gonna migrate to that. So here, as you can see, we're using PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. That's a very powerful framework with a lot of functionality so that we don't have to create it ourselves anymore, and that is just public and that you can use as well. So here we're going to remove the executable version of 7-zip because 7-zip actually has an executable and an MSI version, which are not compatible. So if you want to migrate from executable to MSI, you need to uninstall the executable versions. That's what we're going to do here. And we're also going to remove the 32-bit MSI because, as I said, we're using the 64-bit MSI. So we need to remove that 32-bit version as well. And if there's stuff that you want to add in the pre-install stuff, you can do so here. And then we'll actually run that install and all the consecutive updates with that additional command that you've added in here. Then there's an install part where that's usually very short, where we use placeholders like this to dynamically change the file name based on the actual file name we're uploading to the platform. And then you can configure the post install as well. And that's typically where we configure the language for an application, which for 7-zip is a rich key, but it's obviously different depending on the application. And it's also where we're going to typically disable the auto updates of an application if that application supports auto updating, because we're going to push all of the updates from our platform from within Intune to make sure that we actually take control of that application. On the next tab, we've got update rings. So by default, we're going to create a single application in your tenant. When we update it, it's going to get updated for all the users or all the devices that are in scope. But we also support update rings. What we're going to do then is actually create 3 different applications in your tenant, which we're going to update with a certain amount of delay. Let's configure this to 10 and 30 days, for example. What's going to happen here is we're going to create one fast application, which will update straight away if there's an update available, one slow application, which is going to take 10 days before we're actually going to update it in your tenant, and a release version that's going to delay for 30 days before we're actually going to update it in your tenants. And here on the assignments tab, for each of those rings, you can create assignments. Let me just go back to dependencies first. So we also support dependencies. Any application you've already installed using our platform, you can create as a dependency here. So that means that Intune is going to make sure that we're first going to install Airtame in this random example before we're actually going to install 7-zip on your device in case 7-zip would need Airtame as a dependency, for example. Then let's go back to the assignments. So we support 2 types of assignment on this application type. So this application type is install and update. What that's going to do is going to make sure that whatever is running on your device, we're going to update it or install it if it's present on your device, whether or not it's present on your device. And if you make it required, then actually we're going to make sure it gets installed on that device for the users that you select in here, for example. So if you select this group and you make the application required, we're going to make sure that no matter what, the application is going to get installed for the users in that group. But we can also do available apps. So that means the application is going to be available in the company portal. But then we run into the issue that I explained before, where when you update an available application, the update isn't forced for the device. So what we're going to do to make sure that it does get updated is we're going to create an update-only app. I'll explain in a second what that update-only app does, but that app is going to make sure that our available app is actually going to get updated on that device. Let me just create some other assignments here on this tab. And once that's done, we're good to go. There we go. So we've got all our install and update apps configured here. And then when you go to update only, you'll see that the assignments are slightly different. So the update only app, what that app is going to do is it's actually going to be required, which would by default mean that it's going to get installed for that group here, which is not really what you want. You only want it to update any existing 7-zip you have on that device. So what we're going to do to make that update conditional is we're going to make use of the requirement script feature in Intune, and that requirement script is going to check in apps and features on your device to see if there's a 7-zip already installed, and only if there's already a 7-zip installed on your device, it's going to say it's applicable, and it's going to try to update it to the latest version. If we don't find a 7-zip on your device, we're not going to install it at all, and we're just going to skip the update, and it's going to report back as not applicable. And last but not least, what we added a couple of weeks ago is uninstall assignments. Basically, if you create assignments here, we'll uninstall whatever version of 7-zip you have running on your device. So we're going to check again in apps and features if there is a 7-zip installed. And if there is, we're going to uninstall it from that device. I'm just going to go back here because I just noticed that I already have a name, an application that is called 7-zip, and the name has to be unique here. And then when we click through the UI, the app is going to get created. You've got the install here, so the one that we just created, which is grayed out. What actually happened now, and Stefan, this is, I think, interesting for you. So what actually happened now is I've posted to our API. Our API is now downloading all of the source files. It's checking if the hashes of those files still match what we've got in our database. Because every time we update an app, we run all the source files through VirusTotal. And if they're clean, we store the hashes that VirusTotal returns in our database. So those hashes we're checking again. Then we're going to scan in real time again with ClamAV and Defender. We'll also include the ClamAV report in the package itself. We're going to inject all of those PowerShell commands into our template. We're going to sign that with our code signing certificates, wrap all of that into an Intune. The Intune is going to be encrypted and it's going to have a decryption key. We're going to upload those two parts to the Intune portal, and then the application is going to be available for those devices to get installed. That process obviously takes a few minutes. So while that's going on, I'm just going to take a different 7-zip here that is configured in a pretty similar way. So by default, obviously, when the application is created, we're going to leave the updates enabled. But imagine today that we're updating. Oh, we've actually done that already. So we've updated 7-zip to version 22. And it got to the slow ring, and then it turned out there was an issue with 7-zip, and we actually paused the updates for that ring because, yeah, apparently there was some kind of issue going on with 7-zip, so you can just do that there. Then that gives you time to actually fix the issue, and when the issue is fixed, you can re-enable those updates. The other way around works as well. Say you don't want to wait the 2 and 4 days, for example, because there's a 0 day in 7-zip. And you want to patch it as soon as possible, you can just click update now here, and then we'll push out the update to your tenant straight away. And for this one single update, you can actually override the settings you've configured here to not give your user the option to actually postpone that update, and he'll actually get forced to install the update straight away. So all of these options are available for all of the 668 public applications that we have available in our platform. If there's an application missing, you can actually request that. So we differentiate between public and private apps. Public apps are apps that we can just download from the internet without providing a username, without creating an account, that support silent installs and for which we can disable auto updates. Everything else are private apps. They are not going to be free, and we'll upload them to your part of the platform, so they'll only be available for you. But we're also not going to automatically update those. For public apps, we're always going to keep those up to date. So imagine we packaged a private app for you, then we're going to upload it to your part of the platform. And when we sort here, this one, for example, no, I just need to quickly switch to a different tenant. Sorry about that. So imagine here for a second, this is an app that we've just uploaded here as a private application that we've packaged for you. If there's an update available for an app, you can request us to do that update for you, but you can also update it yourself. The updating process is very simple because we standardize that, so you can just upload a new version number, upload some new files, and create some new detection rules. Because we use these placeholders in our commands, it's very likely that it's just going to work out of the box without you having to make a lot of changes. But if you don't want to package yourself, that's if you don't want us to package the application, if you want to do it yourself, that's also fine. You can just upload the application in here. So we just ask for pretty much the same values as Intune does. You can fill those values out. And then we also give you access to the logic in our platform. So for example, the processes part, if you fill that out, we're going to check on the device to see if you have to show a notification for the user or not. If we do, then if the process is running, so if Chrome.exe is running here, then we'll show a notification. If it's not, we'll just update it silently. And if you fill out the apps and features bit, that's what we're going to use to detect on the device if there's already a previous version of the application installed. Then we get to the files part. So you can just upload whatever files you want in here, create some install commands. So again, PowerShell and deployment toolkit, create some detection rules. And then when you upload the application, it's going to be available like any other application in the platform, and you'll be able to install it like that as well. Then I'm quickly going to move on to the preferences. So that's also something new we added recently. And I'm just going to switch to a different tenant again. So in the registry part, you can actually create registry keys. So that's something that is in a new world, in new Intune world, a bit more cumbersome. You have to create scripts and then make sure those scripts actually work fine, etc., etc. So what we've done is made a very easy UI where we're going to make it very easy to deploy a bunch of rich keys. So you can just create those here, a string, for example, and then we'll make sure we create that rich key as a Win32 app and deploy it to your devices, for example. So you can create a bunch of rich keys in there, and we'll make sure those rich keys get created on your devices. Then I'm going to very quickly switch the reporting part to a different tenant again, where here in the reporting bit, what we're going to do is every night we're going to collect all of the statistics of your environment, of all of your applications, and we're going to show them in a different overview. So here you can really get an aggregated overview of all of the applications in your tenant. You can go back 30 days in time, export that to a CSV. And what we're going to do as well is when we see an application failed, we're going to actually make sure that we collect those log files for that application. So because we know which applications fail, because we generate a lot of log files and keep those in a specific location, we're going to make use of the log collection feature in Intune, and we're actually going to deploy those log files, collect those log files for you so that it's a lot easier to figure out what actually went wrong. And then you get these long log files, for example, to see where that application broke. That's it for the regular customer part. If you're a managed service provider, we've got some features for you as well. So first of all, you can just switch between customers here. You can actually invite customers using this link. So we base that on the CSP program of Microsoft, where you can just generate a link. If the customer browses to that link or registers using that link, they'll be connected to you, and you'll be able to switch between those customers using this view and actually see what the customer is seeing exactly. And what we've got as well is application sets there. So first of all, what the application sets are is a bunch of applications that you can connect to a bunch of customers. Probably like 80% of your customers are using the same base sets of, let's say, 10, 20 applications. It's already pretty simple to deploy them using our platform, but with application sets, it's even easier. So you can just, let me just add an app here. Let's just select an app here, and then you can configure it in pretty much the same way as we've seen before. So as you can see here, these options are pretty much the same as what you've just seen. And here in the assignments, you can select which customers are actually going to be assigned to that application. So imagine that you're onboarding a new customer. It's just a matter of going to that application set, checking that customer, hitting save, and that customer will get all of those applications that are present in that platform. Then there's a bunch of other settings here, but I'll skip over those and I'll conclude the demo for now because we need some time for Q&A as well. So I'll open the floor for anyone who has any questions, both about my part, but obviously also about Thijs and Peter's part of this webinar. Thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions?
There have been some questions in the chat, but
did we answer all of them?
Yes, all of them are answered already. So feel free to unmute yourself in case you have a question or add them to the chat.
In different, you mean categories in the platform? In Intune, that you can use the Intune categories? I think so, right? Yeah, so we don't currently support those categories in our platform, but if that's a real hard requirement from your end, then let's have a call to discuss what we can do there. We just haven't had the question a lot yet to implement those categories. Stefan, you are asking me very dangerous questions. My answer is going to be the same as the previous question you asked, so definitely talking about that as well. We're looking into that, and there is stuff in the pipe around application discovery. All right, no other questions. Then it's time to wrap up. Nikunj, no, it's been discussed before. It's somewhere on the roadmap, but there is no committed time frame for scheduled updates. Yes, Stefan, you currently have to select all the applications and then indeed install. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your time. I hope it was interesting. I found it interesting, anyways. I wish you all a very nice day, a very nice evening, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.